worst, when that cost was paid for by Palestinians, sometimes by Lebanese, sometimes by others, it was paid for in the undermining of an international institutional architecture of law, of the UN itself. Today, it literally impacts every economy in the world. That Israel was emboldened and empowered to drag America into this war. So the question of how do you contain and deter this project is no longer limited to how does one prevent Palestinian suffering, uplift the prospect of Palestinian rights. As you know, I would argue this is a disaster for the Jewish people, the Jewish future as well, but I'll pause there.
Can you help us think through Israel's decision to join the Board of Peace? I mean, Prime Minister Netanyahu was clearly not comfortable with that. I mean, he was reluctant, he didn't show up at the signing. You know, and Prime Minister Netanyahu, just like, for instance, the Lebanon ceasefire yesterday, seems to be compelled, if not expected, by the US administration to agree to a number of things. So here on this panel, I suspect the sense is the Board of Peace complicates things and can, you know, undermine legitimacy and so on. But why did Israel oppose it, you know, at the beginning, and why was it so reluctant to join? And does that offer a space, you know, perhaps to design something that, you know, forces Israel's hand on some issues?
So I've tried to interrogate this question, and I think it's an interesting one, because I think Netanyahu came into office a little uncertain what a second-term Trump administration would bring. There were suggestions that Trump had been unhappy that Netanyahu didn't go along with the stolen election narrative in 2020. He's an unpredictable guy. He sends someone who we're now all very familiar with, we weren't then, Witkoff, prior to the inauguration to say, right, let's get the ceasefire done. And you know, there's the famous story that Netanyahu tried to fob him off, well, it's the Sabbath. You're going to see me on the Sabbath, Mr. Prime Minister. So Netanyahu was uncertain. He agrees to the ceasefire. He makes sure that that ceasefire, I'm not talking about the so-called ceasefire we're currently in, but the one that began in January of 25. He makes sure that collapses. It's not for no reason that Netanyahu has been the most in Trump's face foreign leader, bar none. 7 meetings, a frequency of phone calls which is unparalleled, even before they went to war together against Iran. And so I think Netanyahu, understood he had to find his angle. All this talk of I'm the peace president was potentially problematic for Israel. B, he has tremendous access through the things that we're aware of in terms of the Israel lobby. Also, uniformity of message. So when different regional leaders are more or less rowing in the same direction, more or less is doing quite a lot of work there, even if they have access to the president. With Netanyahu, there's message discipline. And I think Netanyahu realized he had to offer Trump something else. And this is where the June bombing in Iran is really important. Netanyahu goes for it. Trump joins. He thinks this looks good. And if you hear the way he speaks about how he sat in the Situation Room and saw the bombs. There was about a month ago when we were into this now more full-scale war against Iran. He's in a presser in the Oval Office, and he asked one of his aides, he said, bring me over that beautiful B-2 bomber, and he gives it a hug. It's a model of a B-2 bomber. Netanyahu seems to have had a very significant influence in getting Trump excited about using American military power. It's after Iran that you see the bombings in Nigeria, that of course you see Venezuela, you see now the blockade and the threats against Cuba, and of course Iran right front and center of that. And Netanyahu, and you constantly hear this Trumpian reference to after 3,000 years, I've made peace in the Middle East. Now Netanyahu constantly has to check himself because, as you say, suddenly yesterday he's faced with something he didn't want in Lebanon. But I think Netanyahu, first of all, feels that he has won crucial decisions in this administration. The New York Times piece on how America went into this war, which I find really quite credible, and the BS that the Israelis sold them, and that there is no war without Netanyahu essentially taking over the Situation Room and setting out the war plans. That's really significant. The other thing is that throughout this, Netanyahu has benefited from something on the Palestinian file, because that's where the question came from. But what about his concerns with the Board of Peace? I mean, first of all, remember when the Board of Peace was first signed, it's in Davos, and Netanyahu has an international criminal court arrest warrant against his name, so Davos wasn't likely to be a place to be. But I think Netanyahu is eminently confident that decades of marinating, of basting American politics, mainstream media narratives in Israel's version of the world and of the Palestinians, the absence of a Palestinian mainstream counter-narrative or leader. You haven't, I don't want to go too much into this. The people involved in this, on the American side, Netanyahu therefore feels very confident that on the Palestinian file he can get his way, and that is what we see happening, even to the extent to which you get these grotesque presentations, PowerPoints, where you look at the reality in Gaza and then you see the PowerPoints of the gleaming towers, which is, it's a certain racist narrative that maybe we'll be able to come back to. But I think Netanyahu feels, look, on the Board of Peace, there's supposed to be things that the Israelis probably didn't like the International Stabilization Force. They have so easily squashed those things. They've set up this civil military coordination center, which basically gives them a huge amount of control of what everyone gets to see and gets to talk about. So I think he feels confident on that file.
Thank you. You'll forgive me, Madam Minister, for that comment, but perhaps in that lag of time when Netanyahu was deciding whether to sign on Board of Peace or not, the states of Palestine should have said yes. Trump would have said great. He wouldn't have realized, and you would have had de facto recognition from the US on that one. I mean, it just feels a bit, the way all this came together feels, how do you say, surreal in some ways, speaking as an analyst, because we still don't understand the underpinnings, the structure, the organizational responsibilities of all that. So if it's a vehicle, let's use it. I have a pointed question to you. What do you tell, Madam Minister, your partners, your allies who are part of the Board of Peace? What's your message to them? They joined, as Daniel said, because of Palestine. That was the initial project. It was because of Gaza. What do you tell them? What are your expectations? How much communication do you get? Are you able to feed into either the board or the executive board or the Gaza executive board? I mean, we can talk about all the acronyms again, but what's your message to them?
Well, we communicate with the countries on ongoing basis, and what we're telling them is, you do appreciate that we have accepted the Board of Peace and embraced it because we could not say no to any venture of peace that would stop the suffering of our people, because that is our first and foremost priority. Now there are terms for that agreement, and the guarantors of that agreement need to put accountability mechanisms and not leave it as an open-ended process. If you leave it as an open-ended process, you will be stuck. And today we are stuck in phase one, not being able to move to phase two. Our people in Gaza need immediate relief. And it is a shame on the international community, the whole world, that has witnessed the suffering of our people for 2 years being genocided brutally in Gaza, normalizing our suffering for so long. Our suffering has been normalized for 7 decades, and this cycle needs to stop. There are conditions in that agreement. Those conditions need to be respected. We need to see a board that is operational on the ground. That board is transitional and is not permanent, and it needs to be reminded that it is transitional, and it needs to be reminded that somewhere in that agreement it says that this will lead to independence if the conditions are present. We need to work towards those conditions.
Thank you, Madam Minister. I want to bring a perspective from Turkey. Professor Ismail, if you don't mind, you are a specialist on Middle East affairs and Gulf affairs in particular. If we can have the microphone coming, it's coming to you. First, how is all this viewed from a Turkish perspective? And can you share your own analysis of that as well?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the panelists for these great informative presentations. Actually, I wanted to bring a bit a geopolitical angle to the perspective, maybe continue from Daniel's points, because you know, what we are witnessing now with the war between US and Israel and Iran, we already heard that there are already a lot of challenges. This process, this Gaza plan has a lot of challenges already. But then now we have this regional crisis which is taking place in the Gulf region basically, but it might have serious spillover effects to the Gaza peace plan also. So maybe we can include some of the challenges and angles how this crisis might affect this Gaza peace plan, which has already have huge challenges. Maybe Carl, on the humanitarian level, because there are some spillovers already, like aid flow, for instance. We heard that in some reports it is reducing because of the war, and also rising costs is obviously because of the oil prices as well, and the crossings have become much more difficult. So like this kind of external shocks, basically my response, how it would affect this plan which has already have huge challenges. Thank you.
Thank you. You know, this leads to a question I wanted to ask you. Do you see a change in the behavior or the priorities by contributing nations towards the Gaza fund, funding for Gaza, since the ceasefire board? I suspect perhaps there was a small peak then because everyone wanted to show some commitment, small. I don't know, the money seems to have gone to the Board of Peace. I don't know how much of it goes to humanitarian issues, but even more so since the beginning of the war between the US, Israel, and Iran. Has there been any financial material effect?
I mean, listen, you know, I've just come straight from a 7-day visit to Sudan. I'm going straight to Afghanistan from here. Every other operation is suffering from a lack of funding. That's not the issue in Gaza. The issue in Gaza is access, number one. Yes, you know, we had managed to work over these past few weeks, months, up to what you could say then is to complete a phase one on the food side. As I spoke before, the other sectors are not by any means making that progress. What happened when the war hit was that we moved back from there. We had a few days complete closure, and then we began having again the challenge of every day kind of negotiating ourselves back up. I would say we are somewhere back to where we were just before the war now. Over the past couple of days, Eretz, the northern crossing, has also opened, and so in terms of food again, we are back to where we were. The commercial is still working itself back, but we wanted to move beyond that. As I said, it was not to kind of sustain that basic level. We want to expand so the other sectors can also be completed and then move beyond into recovery. I mean, for us, really to boost the commercial is the key one, because it also brings the diversity of food that we cannot cater to, that is really needed for people, and not least children, to fully recover from the malnutrition they were exposed to. But it's also a way of bringing back dignity, because when people can go to the markets, can cook for themselves, and increasingly also have their own money and actually contribute with daily work, that is what matters right now. I mean, that's what people, when I spoke to them, were asking for in my last visit. It was really to help them bring back some normalcy of life, bring back some of that dignity. It's heartening. These schools, it's the most important thing for me right now. I think with UNICEF and UNRWA and some others, they are now able to cater to about half the children. I mean, that should be a no-brainer, to expand that to all the children of Gaza, for them to be able to spend a few hours away from home with other children, getting some stimulation in terms of learning, and also getting a school meal. I mean, if there's one thing I would ask for, it's that, because also meeting these children in the classroom is remarkable. Resilience is maybe a tired word, but I can't think of anything else. When you meet these 12, 13-year-old girls who are full of energy and confidence and, want to move forward, want a better future, I mean, we cannot let them down. They need the basics here. And so that's our focus from WFP. And as I said, let's not hold back on that because of the challenges on the political front. That's my main ask, really. That, and the fact that we need to also support the local capacity, the Palestinian institutions in this phase.
Thank you. I mean, it's good that you reminded us that there are needs across the world at this point, and rising needs. You mentioned Sudan, Afghanistan. I'm pretty sure you have a longer list. The costs are going up as well. Yeah. But importantly, there are countries that we generally took for granted, expected to put money in the pot to be, whose attention is elsewhere now. Yeah. The Gulf states have been, important, generous contributors. There are others. Yeah. Turkey is one of them. We will deal with a structurally different funding landscape later. And this is where, how international organizations, international agencies are able to overcome this current phase, and it's going to be crucial. I mean, we know the funding issues that the UN has as an organization. There is now competition from the Board of Peace. Not that it compares in terms of legitimacy or capacity, but hey, there's another forum, and money will have to flow there, some at least. Yeah. My issue is, when you look at all these challenges as WFP, is the answer to grow more local? I mean, is that the, local ownership is a way to build some resilience against those external shocks?
I mean, yeah, it's not only the right thing to do because it brings back, dignity and normalcy for people. It is also the smart thing to do from a financial efficiency point of view. I mean, if I speak to Sudan, where I just spent 7 days, including in Darfur, there are always pockets of stability. And in those, you need to begin helping people to get back on their lands, begin rebuilding their lives. It's cheaper, and it's something that, is more sustainable. There are parts of Sudan where we're supporting with irrigation systems so that production goes up, and so prices come down in markets. So when we provide our cash support in Khartoum, they get more out of the cash that we are provided. But there are also pockets where, food is needed because there is no market. And there are places where they don't also have anything to cook, so hot meals, something ready to eat is also needed. And that's the phasing we've seen in Gaza as well. I mean, when people were on the move, they couldn't cook for themselves, so we provided the hot meals. As soon as there was, they had established themselves with, some element to cook for themselves, it was food provided. But now we need to move into a phase where, we are providing them cash, we get the markets up and running, and that, we are also establishing a local food system, including with some production. That's going to take some time, so that we can also begin phasing out. But I mean, globally, yes, already last year, we have in 2 years lost about 40% of our funding. It's not only the US, and now it's also Europe. In between Sudan and here, I stopped by in Berlin for the Sudan conference. In Germany, they are now writing down the growth rate. They have increasing domestic pressures. They are taking a further burden in Ukraine, as they would refer to it. And so, we are seeing cuts across, and I think that's going to continue. So this bifurcation of needs going up, because our estimate is now that if the war continues, if the cost of oil remains above $100 per barrel, we will see by July another 45 million people pushed into acute hunger. So needs are going dramatically up, money is coming down, and we are trying to manage that gap that is increasingly growing.
I want to,
Thank you.
if I may,
Make it short, and then we'll start taking questions.
I'm not saying anything you wouldn't have heard before. This idea of throwing good money after bad. The world is paying an Israel extremism tax now. Everyone, every country is going through that. And there's a question here. Would you rather keep allowing the destruction of surrounding countries, the expansion of a regional war for domination, or deal with this thing, which is dealable with? You create a different incentive structure. Stop indulging it. It's dangerous. It's out of control. By the way, we're sitting in Turkey. I don't probably need to tell anyone here who is next in the crosshairs of Israel if it is allowed to continue acting. So there's a basic question of politics, and there's also an unavoidable question of military deterrence. Can Israel be militarily contained and deterred? And the Israeli bet is that the rest of the region will not get its act together, that people won't cooperate, won't try and impose a containment and deterrence strategy. And that's a not secondary question.
Okay. Thank you. We have a bit more than 10 minutes to take a few questions. Please, two things. Introduce yourselves and ask a question, a short one. The gentleman here first, and then catch my attention if you're interested.
Thank you so much. My name is Abdul Hamid Sayam. I am an accredited journalist to the United Nations for Al-Quds Al-Arabi. Recently, Madam Minister, there was a meeting in Cairo where some of the Palestinian factions met with Nikolai Mladinov. Mladinov also, he gave some kind of sweet talk, but the core of his demand is to disarm the Palestinian first, without paying attention to the first phase, which has never been implemented properly. The food, the humanitarian quantities entering Gaza was less than demanded by Resolution 2803. All the crossing points to Gaza are not open except one, Karim Abu Salim, sometimes Zikim, but not all of them as the resolution demanded. And also asking Israel to withdraw from the lines that it occupied. In fact, it advanced the yellow line to 51% of Gaza. So the 2 million of Gazas are now in 49% of the land, as you know. So do you see that as a right approach for entering the second phase? That is my question. And if I might, just a follow-up about the humanitarian work in Gaza, and the attack on UNRWA. I want to hear your view, Mr. Skau, on UNRWA, your colleagues who had been attacked and killed in Gaza. And recently, a WHO who was appointed on Monday was killed on Tuesday. And WHO said, I'm going to suspend my work. And you see the attack on Francesca Albanese, and on ICC, and on ICJ. And how can you work within this environment? Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think, Minister, the first question to you, could you?
The plan has clear phases, and those clear phases should have a time-bound framework. We need to move from phase 1 to phase 2. There are obligations in phase 1, and these obligations are on all sides. All sides need to be put into account. It's not a matter of what comes first, the egg or the chicken. It's a matter of obligations by sides that have signed the treaty that need to commit to delivering. All sides need to be held accountable. Moving to the second phase requires ending phase 1 and moving clean cut to phase 2. And this is what we look for.
Sir, on first responders?
I mean, in any complex emergency now, we are trying to balance principles, taking a principled approach by our focus on alleviating suffering, on saving lives. And that's been, you know, a very difficult one in the Gaza context. And when we, do the life-saving, that we don't undermine those principles. But that's an impossible dilemma in many situations. And we have supported UNRWA as much as we can from the start. We started off working together, hand in hand, dividing basically the population in two, 1 million UNRWA, 1 million us when it came to food. Then we did their transport, their pipeline. Then we did their transport inside. What we basically concluded now is that we do the food and they focus on the other basic services. But it's a very, very difficult situation. Now, you also spoke to the security situation, and I mean, it's absolutely unacceptable still. We don't have proper armored vehicles in Gaza, despite that is certainly required under the conditions we work. So that's just one of these basic enabling elements that we don't have. We don't have proper warehousing, so when food is left on the platforms at Kerem Shalom over a day and there is rain, food is spoiled, or children for clothes that UNICEF brings in. So, there are some of these basic elements for a humanitarian operation that is not there. And you could argue then, okay, why don't we just say, okay, basta, this is it, now we stop. Well, we still feel that we are making sufficient difference and saving enough lives for us to be navigating through these obstacles. And the point, we were not, convinced that we're making more difference than the challenges we are facing. We would halt operations, but we've not reached that point so far.
Thank you. The lady here, and then just after, the gentleman just in front. Thank you.
Hello, thank you. Dr. Maria Fantappi, Istituto Affari Internazionali. A question for Daniel about actually how we roll back this madness of the Board of Peace, in the sense that I fear that the issue that is not working, it doesn't solve it doesn't solve the issue that is difficult to roll it back, because it's sort of the existence of it captures all the narrative on Palestinian reconstruction there. So intellectually, I want to pick your brain. How do we move forward, and what would you respond to those one who say, well, Heda Hua is the only thing that is there, We have to be pragmatic, a word that I honestly hate. So please, we need your answers.
Hold your fire. Sir, please.
Faisal Dawji from South Africa. The language and conversation or conversations that I'm hearing from the minister and the representative from the UN is about managing the occupation rather than ending the occupation. And I find that very problematic because even the Palestinian Authority has not called for what Daniel speaks about, the deterrence, in terms of call for a no-fly zone over Gaza. Why hasn't that happened? It happened in Libya, it happened in Iraq, and for that matter, UN forces were sent to Bosnia on the ground. None of that has been called for. So the UN and the PA, in my mind, are custodians of occupation rather than, and managing the occupation rather than calling for the end of the occupation. And I think that's a huge problem. Thank you.
Madam Minister,
Yes.
you go first and then we'll...
On the note on managing the occupation, would you call going to the ICC, the ICJ, the New York Declaration, the Global Alliance, talking to countries around the world to put an embargo or sanction settlements, all of this is in the line of the ultimate goal of ending the occupation. But we know ending the occupation is a process. The world knows it's a process. The world rallied behind the New York Declaration. 143 countries endorsed the New York Declaration. The world, the highest legal authority, asked for the dismantlement of the occupation in a year's time. It didn't happen. This is the reality of the world we're living in. It's not just the responsibility of the Palestinians to take this forward. It's the responsibility of the world, because Palestine is a test for the world. And I can assure you that everything the Palestinian Authority does is in the path of ending this occupation. This is a belligerent occupation that has been suffocating our lives for decades, and it's long overdue that we get rid of it. If we can do more, I'm interested to sit and speak more on it so that we can have, maybe think out of the box and help us in that path.
Yeah, I mean, very briefly, I'm not here representing the UN. I represent the World Food Programme, a UN operational food agency, and focusing on what, the work that we do there. The Secretary General has been spoken very clearly and do so repeatedly in the Security Council, and so does his representatives on the ground. And I think that's partly the beauty also of the UN system, the rich array of tools that we have in the toolbox, where our focus is really on alleviating the suffering of the Palestinian people.
Thank you. Daniel, you have the last word of the session.
I don't know how one goes about answering that without acknowledging that we are, I think, living through a moment of accelerated imperial collapse when it comes to the US. And when you read about how those things happened in history and books, and certain leaders that accelerated those things, certain missteps that accelerated those things, it's one thing to read about it, it's another thing to live through it. And that is what we are all living through, which is incredibly dangerous. I mean, I think most of us wake up every day terrified what this person with a messiah complex and a fragile ego and all the rest of it may do. But what you see is that it's so difficult, especially but not exclusively for those countries who have based some kind of sense of their positionality and how they secure themselves in the world on that American guarantee. I mean, the Gulf states are on the horn of an acute dilemma, because America didn't give a damn about those interests and did what Israel wanted, and we knew what would happen. He's trashing Europe and NATO every day, yet I'm not seeing any coherent thinking in Europe. He's just radically repositioned American military assets from East Asia to a place that the American national security strategy of 4 or 5 months ago said was not a priority. So how one relates to the Board of Peace, I would say, is of a one with that broader set of questions. And Emil, you said, how does it, what is its structures, what are its underpinnings, its responsibilities? I don't think there's any of that. You barely have that in the American system. I mean, you do not have an American interagency functioning process anymore. So I think the work we have to do is, and there's, you know, when it comes to the Israel question, for instance, you see dramatic shifts in public opinion, including inside the US. We have to keep mobilizing that, and we have to keep feeding into how one rethinks a post-America climate, a post-American preponderance, and we have to accelerate the bringing of that about. And I mean, I'll give you one example. You know, it's not rocking the world, but it's a different approach, which is the Hague Group, which is a group of global South countries co-chaired by South Africa and Colombia during the Gaza genocide, and it's still working, that came together and say, we will simply uphold the rulings of the international legal system. One of the things that, and let me close with this, that makes it so difficult around Palestine is we don't have, and I say this with the greatest of respect, Madam Minister, we don't have a national movement that is bringing to the fore mojo, agency, strategy, a liberation narrative. Because if you read that New York Declaration, it is an incredible capitulation to your occupier in terms of the things Palestinians say they will take on themselves that are defined by the apartheid state which rules them. The everyday security cooperation, the inability to unify, and you know better than me that while we've spent most of our time talking about Gaza, the Israeli assault on the West Bank is unprecedented since 1967. So, unless and until that gets to a different place, we are even more handicapped in challenging these things. And I'll say one more sentence.
One sentence.
One sentence. People have to understand something. Israel got to yes. Israel got to acceptance of Israel, 2 states, PLO recognition, the Arab Peace Initiative. Even recently, Lebanon has sat down in unprecedented ways. Syria has sat. One has to understand the actual existing Zionist project in terms of what it is and what it does, and it needs to be challenged in different ways. While still, for me, really important to acknowledge, the Israeli Jewish community has a future in this region, not as the managers of an ethno-supremacist state, which endangers the region. You have to separate those two things, but unless you understand the fundamentals, it's really hard to come at any of these things.
Well, thank you very much. We have to call this session to a close. Minister, Mr. Skau, Mr. Levy, thank you very much for your insights. Thank you for your attention. I suspect you know, the conversation will continue in the hallways and other ballrooms as well. So thanks again. Enjoy your time here. Bye.
Thank you.